Good morning. Thanks everybody for coming. Today we're getting together to continue our discussion. We have some important subjects today. We're going to talk about demographic change of the county, economic development, and also health and human services to our community. But before that, I want to take the opportunity to wish everybody a very happy Lunar New Year. Best wishes to you this year. Okay. Very happy. Yeah, and by the way, I bought a mug. I didn't bring with me there. It said, it's a toothpick saying, I want coffee and I want money. I think that's very kind of By the way, I also brought a little bit of treats, so feel free to help yourself. So Jeff, you want to start?
Sure.
Good morning. I don't know what's Chinese English. It's very nice. My name is Jeff Rano. I'm the chief of the research division in the Department of Planning and Zoning. And today I'm going to be talking about three things: mainly population trends, new housing and land use, and the impact of recent changes to the APFO, which is a tie to the last affordability committee. It seems like there's several people that were on that year that are also this year, so we recall that discussion. So I'm going to kind of give an introduction of that topic. And then there'll be more discussion on this on the 19th to this committee. So to first talk about population growth, this kind of paints a picture of the history of Howard County and the projected future. So this is the growth of Howard County since World War II, since 1940. You can see that by many jurisdictions outside of major cities, it's grown rapidly. It's no different than many other suburbs around the country. And in 2010, which is the last census, the population was about 287,000 people. The red bars in this next chart are our projected estimates of future population based on our general plan. The last general plan was done in 2012, and it's known as Plan Howard 2030. So about every 10 years, the county does a general plan. We're about to do a general plan over the next few years, actually, about 10 years. And based on that general plan, we project population growth based on land use and based on the zoning that is called for as implementation in the general plan. So it's really tied to policy, and it's based on future capacity in the county as it currently stands now. Capacity constantly changes, but as it currently stands now, based on current county policy, this is what we project. So this is the same information, but just shown in a different way. It's a kind of a lot of information, but it's a good chart. The red is the percent change each decade. The red line is the percent change each decade. The blue is the absolute growth within that decade. So you can see that from in the 80s, the county had the most population increase, about 68,000 people. It's about a 58% increase. In the 70s, even though the population wasn't that as much, the population was doubled. So you can see kind of how the county changed during that time period. From 2000 to 2010, we experienced about a 16% growth. In 2010 to 2020, we estimate about also 60% growth. Now the interesting thing is you'll see that the growth between the next decade, 2010 to 2020, it's really coming out different than we thought. We had initially had this blue line kind of continuing down. And so I'm going to talk about why that's the case, why is that happening. And there's several different reasons to that. Mainly it has to do with the household size is increasing, bring that moving forward. But it's really an interesting thing. It's still a 16% growth rate, and the population has increased a little bit more this decade compared to the last. At least that's what we estimate. The census comes out with annual population growth estimates, and those are estimates. And we also try to estimate population based on new housing units. So as new housing is built, we tie people to those housing. We start with the 2010 census base, and then as new housing is built, we add people to the county. And we track that, but what we've been finding each year is that the census is coming out a little higher than we are projecting based on what we would think based on new construction. Now in 2000, when we did that, we pretty much tracked with the census. It worked out pretty well. But this time around, the Census Bureau is coming out with higher annual projections than we would think from new housing. And it's important to keep in mind these are just estimates, so that it's not a 100% count. The Census Bureau estimates they have birth records, death records. They look at tax records for domestic migration. If you live in California one year and then you're in Howard County the next year, they kind of track people domestically that way. And they look at international migration trends. So they project population different than we would in terms of new construction and new housing. But so it's an interesting trend. The question is, you know, are they correct? We'll find out in 2020 with the census coming up. But this trend is interesting to kind of look at. So we're going to talk about that in a second, but this is kind of a prelude to that. So this is the housing units that were built from 2001 to 2010. We averaged about 1,500 units per year. And that's based on the Adequate Public Facilities Ordinance. It's based on the general plan. The general plan sets the target. Actually, in the general plan, it says how many units we can grow each year, and then the APFO, Adequate Public Facilities Ordinance law, mandates that many units are built per year. It's capped, basically. If more units come in to be built, they have to wait until the following year. So we cap it. And so policy set 1,500, and we actually built about 1,500 per year. So APFO is a very strong mechanism that works. That basically manages growth. It started in 1992, so it worked in the 90s, and then it's working again. What's happened recently is a little higher, and the reason is because two things. One, in 2010, the Downtown Columbia plan was adopted. And that plan allowed for 6,200 units in Downtown Columbia. And that was a general plan amendment to the 2000 plan. So we added units, so the policy was to add more units to downtown. So some of those units are being built in downtown, so it's a little higher. The other thing, there was a recession at the end of 2007-8, units were sort of slowing down. So I think we're doing a little bit of catch-up. So units that were approved but didn't come forward, market conditions, are now coming forward. So for those two reasons, Downtown Columbia and kind of the catch-up, we're averaging higher units the last 8 years. This is the same chart, but it shows the unit type. So the blue is single-family detached, the green is single-family attached, and the red or orange is apartment and condos. Those are both rentals and condos. You can see the trend, and this is the trend of the future of the county. When we do the next general plan, we're going to really focus on this new kind of paradigm. For the county becoming a redevelopment county, there's not much land left for single-family detached. Any kind of future development is going to be redevelopment in places like downtown Columbia, along the Route 1 corridor. So the trend of single-family detached is going down. That will continue. It'll still be low. Probably about 1/3 of all homes in the next 5-10 years will be single-family detached, or even less than that, maybe 20%. But we're having higher density apartment units and condos and some townhouses as well. You're going to see these spikes from one year to the next because you might have an apartment building that's 400 units, like in downtown Columbia. So that gets built that year, you're going to see this spike. So it has nothing to do with this. But that's the future of the county. This shows the percentage by unit type on the last chart for 2001 to 2010. 43% of the units were single-family detached compared to 30% in more recent times. And this will continue to look like this more going forward in the future. So going back to the point I said earlier about the sort of higher rate of growth than we anticipated, or based on what we would think from new construction. I mean, there was higher as a level of new construction compared to the previous 10 years. You saw that chart, 1,700 versus 1,500 average. But the number of apartments is a lot higher than it had been. And the number of people living in apartments is a lot less than the number of people living in single-family detached and townhouses typically. So that can explain the whole reason why the population is going a little bit further. So we took a look at these household size statistics. Now the interesting thing is it's 1980 was 2.94, and if you were to go back further to like the 40s and 50s and 60s, it was even higher. So there's like a 4-decade trend of household size decreasing, and people had larger families, really extended families at that time in the country. So the nuclear family and formation of that kind of concept socially really started, occurred over the 40s, 50s, 60s. So we had this trend, but then it sort of remained the same in 2000, and it also remained the same in 2010, but we had this slight uptick in 2017. So this was a reversal of trends, you know, are many decades long trends. And then if you look more closely, what if you look at the ownership rate? So this is based on people that own homes. So this would be an average of people that live in you know, single-family detached homes that they own, or a townhouse that they own, any kind of ownership units. So it has increased a little bit, but it's largely flat. But if you look at the apartments, you get a larger increase. So it went from 2.22 to 2.34 to 2.52. So the ownership rate is increased about 0.7%, whereas the renter increase is 7.7% increase. So you have a lot of, and if you spread that over the whole county, there's about 120,000 homes in the county. That 7.7%, although it doesn't seem like much, it kind of adds up over time, right? It kind of spreads out the existing base. Yes?
Does the renter only reflect apartments or also townhomes and townhomes that are listed? That stat that you have.
Yeah, you know, I think it's from the Census Bureau, so I think it's apartments only. But even if it were to include the other, there's not a lot of single-family detached homes that are rented, relatively.
Townhomes?
Townhomes, there's some townhomes rented. Yeah. Generally, I think mostly it's related to apartments. So you see that increase there, and so the one thing that's important to note, the new apartment units that are being built, like in downtown Columbia, those yields are going to be even smaller than the average apartment, because the new kinds of apartments that are being built in downtown Columbia, they're studios and one-bedrooms, so the yields are very low. This increase is most likely occurring in the older apartments that might be 2 or 3 bedroom garden-style apartments in older parts of Howard County that were built in the 60s, 70s, 80s, in Columbia and other parts like that. So we're seeing an increase in that, and that in part could explain why the population is increasing. Overall, it's about a 2.6 increase in household size. So again, that really sort of, between the slight increase in housing being built, as well as the household size trends, we're seeing that.
How accurate do you assume those numbers are, since they're coming from the census, and the census consistently underrepresents minority and immigrant populations?
Yeah, so, well, this comes from the census, the American Community Survey, and it's called the American Community Survey. So they send out survey forms to, like, I think it's, I don't know what, if it's 1 out of every 100 homes, something like that. So there is a margin of error. As far as underrepresenting, I don't think that occurs with this. That might occur with the decennial census, when they go out and try to count people. That's why they have these complete count committees to try to make sure you get everybody, including those that might be underrepresented. But this is more like a statistical measure. So, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I'm just saying it's a little bit different, I think, than what you're saying.
Do you have the population growth based on age? So do we know, or, I mean, I know we've seen charts of the number of aging in the community growing, the number of kids growing, but do you have this broken out?
I don't have that broken out, no. The population is aging, but I haven't looked at that. So that's that. So now if we talk about new housing in the future, this is our current homes, about 120,000 homes. This is based on the capacity of the county, based on zoning capacity, based on projects and process. And so the difference between this and this is all this in between here. And so we track pretty closely the stages of development. So what this means is about 1,600 homes are being built now, or as of this date here. So they have building permits and they're under construction. Once they're finished, they'll be added to this here. This is the unbuilt units. This means that there's subdivisions that have recorded lots, but they don't have a building permit yet. Or it could be an apartment project approved that with a site plan, but the apartment building doesn't have a building permit. This are plans that we're reviewing in DPZ. So developers have submitted plans with this many units in it, and we're reviewing it, and once they're approved, they'll be built. So we actually know more than half of what's going to be in the future, which is really good for planning with the schools, et cetera. We work very closely with the schools to update our projections and give this information to them. This undeveloped is basically, there's no plans in yet, and it could be undeveloped land, raw land that has potential in the future at some point, or it could be, it includes downtown Columbia. That really isn't undeveloped land. There's new apartment buildings going up, for example, in the parking lot of the mall, for example. And it could include the Route 1 corridor, where you might have some older, underutilized land, like a junkyard, for example. It has a current land use, but it could be redeveloped. It's important to keep in mind that these units, it seems like a lot of units, but these are going to be built, these three, built over the next 8 to 10 years. So a lot of these are phase plans. Things take time. Things take 3 years to do in DPZ. So these aren't going to come tomorrow. NAFTA regulates how many will come each year. Yeah, Derek?
The undeveloped, that's just what's zoned residential right now?
Exactly, right. Yeah, right. So yeah, so once we do a general plan, if there's a change, then this could change.
Do you track, you said some of these are phased, so do you have that broken down as to the time period of the phasing?
We have an estimate of phasing, yeah. And that's actually what we give the school system, is the phasing for time. Yeah, we do have that. So that's about 24,000 homes based on the current. And this really points out that the mix is changing. I talked about this before. So the future is, it would be largely apartments and single family detached. Now, the next few slides talk about planning area. So we have these 5 planning areas: Elbridge, Ellicott City, Columbia, the Southeast, and the Rural West. And the next chart sort of summarizes that. These are, the blue is existing by each of the planning areas, and the colors at the top are the various stages that we're talking about. So you can see, puts it in perspective of what's sort of left, and where the development, most of the development is going to occur, and where it exists. Columbia is has the most units, followed by Ellicott City in the Southeast, and the Elk Ridge in the Rural West. And this is really the top part of that chart. So this is the future 24,000 units. Most of them are going to be in Columbia, and most of them are apartments. That's the downtown plan, largely. So that's the downtown plan, followed by the various other areas you can see by unit. So speaking of the downtown plan, this is an important part of the future units in Howard County. Like I said, a lot of land is built on already. The plan was adopted by the county council in 2010, after about 3 or 4 years of deliberation and community input. That plan was adopted, and it's called for 6,200 residential units, 1.25 million square feet of retail, 4.3 million square feet of office, and a hotel conference room. We just finished a monitoring report, so there's copies here you can grab. It basically summarizes what's been done to date since 2010. What's planned for in the future. So this is a good summary of the plan itself and what's transpired. It's about a 30-year plan, so it's really going slower than I think we anticipated. It always seems to go slower than we anticipate. It's already been, it's almost 2020. It's not a third done. It's probably maybe 16% done in terms of different uses, something like that. So there's a ways to go. The other growth area is the Route 1 corridor. And after the 2000 plan, the policy was to concentrate the Route 1 corridor for redevelopment opportunities. And that started to be done, and there's some projects, big projects that have been built and are under construction: Austin Square, Howard Square, Blues Creek, Savage, there's an apartment complex. And it's really largely mixed-use development that includes retail and office and residential. And it's near MARC stations in order to take advantage of transportation between Baltimore and Washington and Howard County. And we're currently we're updating the Route 1 study. So a study was done back in the 2000 plan, 2003-04 time frame. Some design guidelines were implemented then. It's been a while. We're finding that it really hasn't worked very well in many cases. And so this new Route 1 master plan, this time it's a master plan, and is going to look at ways we can rethink the Route 1 corridor based on market realities and things like that. The important thing to note is that most of the Route 1 development, most of the easy stuff has been done. So all the easy stuff in terms of vacant land, big vacant, like Blue Stream was built on this area that was built upon. So there's been a fair amount of growth, and it's happening sort of now, it's sort of catching up to the, so a lot of the new activity along the corridor has happened the last few years, will continue to happen in the next couple of years, and then it's really going to come to a standstill. There's not much left in the Route 1 corridor that's easy. The future will be the redevelopment areas of, you know, older places that might be underutilized, but that'll happen when it's in due time, whenever the owner wishes to do that kind of thing.
Like all the way in the southern tip of the county for the rural racetracks?
Yeah, so that's one of the quote easy ones, because there's nothing there. Well, in terms of land use, it actually hasn't been easy because of the change of ownership and it's been dragging on. So that was slated to happen. What you're referring to is right here. That yellow is undeveloped residential. That was slated to happen, you know, about 8 years ago, finished. But it's not coming to fruition. I think at this point they're talking about, there's a new owner now, and so they're going to still plan for about 1,000 units. And we've had that projected in the pipeline for many years. And every time it's not built, we add it to the next year. So it's good and bad, because it's bad because, for example, we might be planning for it, but it's not happening. But it's good because we're keeping it on the radar, and we know that it will happen at some point. So this is just sort of like a heat map that shows the future development. The darker, the orange reddish is the higher density, the Route 1 corridor and Columbia that I mentioned. So between downtown and the Route 1 corridor, about half of those units, that's what they'll be, the Route 1 corridor or downtown Columbia. As far as land use, I'm going to kind of go through this relatively quickly because we've got to get to APFO. This is our land use breakdown, the different types of land use. The interesting thing, the important thing to note is about 39% of all land in the county is preserved through open space and parkland and preservation. Back in the 90s, the county council and the county executive made a conscious decision to make preservation a priority. So particularly in the rural west, they added an installment purchase program to preserve agricultural land, and that they implemented a type of zoning that also preserved environmental and ag easements. And so the county's done a good job preserving land. You can see there's not much undeveloped left. Part of this will go into preservation, part of it will go into built commercial and residential.
Do you know, is there any other county with a number that looks like 39%?
That would be good to look at. I do know a lot of the counties, like Montgomery County and Baltimore County, Carroll County, they all have these kind of ag pres areas. So that the region as a whole has done a good job in preservation. So it could be that they're as high as 39% too, but I don't know that. So this really shows that the change. So now there's 9% of land is undeveloped. I started in 1994 because that's when the rural west zoning went into place that allowed for this preservation of land and the installment purchase for ag pres. And so between 1994 and 2018, about 21,000 acres were developed as residential or commercial, while at the same time, more acres were added to preservation. So that's an important statistic that I don't think people realize. We actually preserve more land and build it. That includes the east, it's not just the west. So for example, we created a zone called the Residential Environmental District up near the Patapsco area largely. And so when you develop that land, about 50% of it's required to be in open space. So you put homes in half, you have 50% open space because it's an environmental area up near the Patapsco. This is our land use map. By the way, this is online, so you can kind of zoom in and see the various land uses. The light yellow is undeveloped residential, so there's not much, there's pockets. This is the milk producers, so that's kind of this is the latest project. This is the last project in the eastern part of the county of this size. And it's also very controversial. You probably have heard of that. But there's not much left, I guess I mentioned in the east. That's why we're looking at redevelopment. So last, let me talk about the recent changes to APFO. So AFO began in 1992 when County Executive Tillman was elected. He convened a task force in 2015 to look at APFO. It hadn't been looked at comprehensively since about 2002. Task force came out with recommendations, and DPZ wrote a technical staff report in 2016. The bill was forwarded to the Planning Board and County Council in 2017, and then it was adopted in early 2018. It was effective April 26th. It was a long, deliberative process, and it was very a lot of input from a lot of people. It was very difficult. And actually, the County Council ended up passing a bill that was different than what the task force recommended. The task force did not recommend this. That came out through the County Council process. So currently, schools are closed at 115%, but effective this July, so the bill was passed last year, but they delayed this one provision until this year, which is in a few months. Every year, the school system gives us an open-close chart. So this July, they're going to give us an open-close chart with these new percentages. So it used to be that the districts were closed when the projected capacities for elementary school was 115%, so that was reduced to 105%. Middle schools from 115 to 110, and then the high school test for that, where high schools are closed at 150%. The task force did not recommend the high school test. The task force recommended to reduce elementary schools to 110%, which actually matches the school system's own criteria of between 90 and 110%. The County Council, however, through the public process, ended up adopting this 105% for elementary school and the high school test, and adding the high school test at 115%. There were some other changes which I won't get into, but be happy to take questions on if people are interested. But there's other ones. But the biggest changes in terms of how it's going to impact the pace of growth is there. So this is a map that we estimate will happen in July 19. So all the colored areas are where the county will be closed to development. So it's pretty much it's a very strong moratorium. And so these are overlapping districts. So the red is the closed elementary districts. This will be effective in 2019. We think this is an estimate. We haven't seen the chart from the school system. This comes from the feasibility report. The way it works, we look at the feasibility report, and then we actually get the chart in May. But the chart is very likely going to look like this. The blue is the middle school districts, and the kind of the white hatch is high school. So they overlap, obviously. So if you look at our land use database, it covers about 75% of all potential growth. So only 25% of the units are won't be impacted. So it's a big change. It's really a departure from the general plan, and so it's kind of put folks up in it's a conundrum, and we'll kind of explain this moving forward, and Holly will talk about this more as well. So last year's Spending Affordability Advisory Committee recommended a fiscal impact study to look at the fiscal impacts of this. Because we needed a fiscal impact for the general plan, and we anticipated this growth, and now it's not going to happen. We need to look at the fiscal impacts. And this last year's committee was around the time that the county council was deliberating this process, so they knew what was happening. They wanted to kind of look forward to this and anticipate this. So they called for this fiscal study. So we've contracted with somebody called Urban Analytics, and they're working on the study now. And they're going to be presenting to this committee, I think, on February 19th at 7 a.m.
All the very preliminary findings, but the
Yeah. Okay. And then the final report is expected March, April. And so what I've done is working with them is giving them new projections. So based on that map, we expect that from 2020 to 2030, it was 32,600 people, then it's going to reduce to about 16,000 people passed. The impact won't start till about 2022. And this is the same thing, but it shows it shows the difference. So these are all general plan totals projections. New units, yeah, new housing units for the general plan totals. And then this was with change in Apple. So it's expected that it started around 2022, because Apple is always 3 years ahead. So in July 2019, we're going to get the chart from the school system. The county council, will adopt it. If they adopt it as is, then that chart will start with the year 2022, because the planning process takes about 3 years. So plans that come in today in 2019 take about 3 years to move forward. So if a plan comes in today, they get it tested at the initial plan stage. So if a plan comes in and it's tested at the initial plan stage, and it's in a closed school district, it's put on hold. So the 3 years worth of planning won't happen, so the units won't show up by 2022. We do expect growth in the next few years because of plans that are in the pipeline. But since Apple looks 3 years ahead, we expect this impact to start here. And these are our estimates of the reduced units. Now, the way it works is if you're in a closed school district, you're on hold for up to 4 years. And so you retest it each year. And then if the school district is still not open, you get to move forward anyways. And that's the way the law's been since 1992. You can't hold up a person's property rights forever. It's just a way to manage growth. And so we estimate this is about a quarter of what's the capacity. Now this is sort of unclear what will happen, because if you do it pure mathematically, okay, well, everybody did come at the same rate, and then just they'll decide to wait 4 years. So then after 4 years, things will pick back up again. But the reality is, I don't think a lot of projects will come in because they won't want to wait 4 years. They won't be able to afford the carrying costs, nor will they just want to, wait for it. So it's likely, and we've reflected this in numbers, that the growth after 4 years will still be slow as well. Now, of course, the school system things will change. So this is just an estimate. This is sort of like a worst case scenario. But we want to test the fiscal impacts of that worst case scenario. So this is kind of a summary. So Apple has worked slow growth in areas of high demand. And I have some other charts on that show that if anybody's interested. But it really has worked well. Not perfectly, but it's worked as designed. New infrastructure to be planned for with a known 20-year growth place. And these three things are important. So it's really a three-legged stool, the way it was designed in 1992. It includes planning, so you have the general plan, and we plan when the units are coming. We kind of know what's on the ground, we know the zoning, we know the policies. And then the school system is a partner in terms of redistricting. You have to rebalance the growth. You have to use the built capacity as you have it. And then the third one, of course, is you need to build new schools, which is tied to funding. 26 new schools have been built since 1992, about a school a year. So the county's done a really good job, and the school system has done a really good job in building new schools to keep up the capacity. There was recently a meeting with the state delegation a couple Saturdays ago, and these three things were discussed. So I kind of talked about the general plan and APFO, and so we talked about the planning part of it. The superintendent was there talking about redistricting and the process of redistricting and the challenges of redistricting, which, as we all know, is very challenging. And then Carl Del Lorenzo from the administration was there talking about funding. So all these things are being looked at now. So we're looking at the fiscal, so we're thinking of, we're planning. The school system, I think, recently voted, they're looking at redistricting in 2020. So that's sort of on the horizon in terms of trying to do a broader redistricting in 2020. So there are solutions that people are thinking about trying to provide a solution. And lastly, the state delegation is looking at increasing the school, not the transfer tax, the surcharge. Right now, builders pay $1.30 a square foot, and the county council can't raise that. You need the state to enable through state enabling legislation. And so the state delegation is looking at increasing that fee. They have a committee studying that. So we're all kind of trying to get the three-legged stool functioning again, because from July it may not work. So yes.
I just wanted to add something to this. Mm-hmm. The other piece of this is that there is no land to build the schools. So even if we have money, because of the way the county is, there is not a lot of land for where we can place the schools. Because if you look at the general plans, they never looked at reserving areas for school sites. So that is another big challenge we have with the school system, is we have nowhere to put the schools. So keep that in mind, because as our population increases, if the child shows up, we need to give that child a seat. We can't say, no, I'm sorry, we don't have, we're over capacity. No, we have to educate that child. But right now, even if we could build, we have one high school with 13 in the queue, so to speak, but as far as other locations, that is another challenge that we have.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean,
It's good we were 50.
Yeah, right. Well, the other thing is that one thing, you know, that's true, there's not a lot of land up. The standards for the state require like a high school to be 40 acres, for example, middle school 30 acres. So I think a lot of jurisdictions, along with the state, are looking at maybe changing that model to make, you know, maybe partner with a park for a field and build up maybe a 3-story school. That'll have to happen in many places. But you're correct. That's always a huge challenge is to find the land. We know that from trying to find land for the next one. So basically, you know, so the next step is this fiscal study. So it should be an interesting discussion on the 19th. One thing that may come out of this fiscal study is, for example, the kind of irony is that there may not be enough transfer tax or excise tax funds to pay for the current debt service because the anticipated growth in the units aren't coming in. So there's different challenges like that that the county needs to address. Now, of course, most of the funding is through general obligation bonds. Not much through transfer tax and excise tax, but it's still important streams of the revenues to be able to pay for future capital facilities. So that's all I have. Some further questions?
I do have one question. You noted the 3 different types of residential, multifamily, townhouse, and single family. Is the property tax rate that's assessed on each of those exactly the same rate of property tax on property value?
Yeah, it is.
And comparing that to industrial commercial salary, is it higher or lower on a per 100,000 or some kind of basis or not?
Well, it's the same rate as far as 100,000. I'm not sure.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's good. I don't know.
And what's prompted the question is looking at the dynamic of where the stresses for revenue and the future growth is going to be tied to the rate of residential increase, whether there's a difference, whether there's a gap.
I think the rate is the same.
It's the same.
Yeah.
Same rate for $100.
And the fiscal consultants they're going to do a prototype analysis. So they're going to say, what's the fiscal impact of a single-family detached home? What's the fiscal impact of 1,000 square feet of manufacturing space? So you're going to try to look at that kind of answer. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, good morning, everyone. Good morning. If I don't know you, I am Larry Cleo. I'm CEO of the Howard County Economic Development Authority. I'm going to give you a couple of slides about what we do as the authority and some of the recent activities. I'm going to get into some brief bit of market data because I know Jeff has covered some. I covered some as well in his presentation. Then I'll get into some commercial tax base discussion and ideas for future growth. Ron mentioned your question. Our 3 big things that we do, and I'm kind of doing a little bit of history because I know it's a newer group, so you've been part of this group before, some of you've seen some of this, but I just want to put some context around where the discussion goes if you're new to the group. Our 3 big roles that we do at the authority is to grow and retain existing businesses, start new businesses, and attract new businesses to the county, all in the pursuit of increasing the tax base and jobs. Whoa. Some of the more recent projects that we worked on, I threw these logos here just to kind of give you a context of the types of projects that we work on. And Many of these are but-for projects. Many of the projects that we've worked on have caused buildings to be built. J.J. McDonald, Coastal, Tenable, MedStar Health. These are Cephalou. These are all projects that we've worked on that have been the trigger for new buildings to be built. MedStar was really the first building in downtown Columbia as part of the new plan. Tenable is currently under construction. We work with that project to keep them here in the county. That is another new building and triggering $300 million of capital investment. And the range of projects that these cover, essentially, I know it's a bit of an eye chart, but those projects cover a range of industries. I mean, everything from distribution to technology, to engineering, to biotechnology. So it's a wide range of projects that we work on. Over the past 4 years, we've worked on 171 projects that have caused to commit over 5,000 new jobs and retain over 5,000 existing jobs, triggering $320 million of capital investment, affecting over 3 million square feet of space. And technical assistance is another part of the work that we do. It may be, it's helping a business solve a problem. It might be a workforce problem, a financing problem, a traffic problem, whatever it might be. We spend a great deal of our time doing technical assistance. Just to show you the trend of how some of those projects have happened over the past years, the light blue is the existing jobs or the retained jobs of those projects, and the dark blue are the new jobs of those projects. Now, these are just projects that we work on. Typically, it's somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 jobs affected every year. The county averages about 4,000 new jobs a year. So we add to the existing flow of activity. Square footage impacted. Some years we get boomers. Coastal Sunbelt is a 300,000 square foot project. That's a big project. Other years, not so much. Capital investment, you can see, kind of follows the square footage. Just to give you a sense of the flow, the ebb and flow of the work that we do. Here's our technical assistance work that we've done. We average about between 500 and 600 cases a year. All of that activity adds up to a return on every dollar the county invests in the authority, about $5.68 of revenue back to the county, whether that is through property taxes, direct property taxes, direct income taxes, or downstream indirect taxes as well. I'm going to touch a few minutes on the strategic plan because it drives what we do. I'm going to leave a copy in the Dropbox for you all. As you're crafting your report, I urge you to take a look at it because the situational analysis that came out of our 2017 report pointed out 7 or 8 key items that you should be aware of as we're talking about moving forward. Just to touch on a couple of them quickly, the county has a great many strengths, educated workforce, high income, but it also faces real threats that are pointed out as you work your way through the report. The disruption in economic development, it dispels the myth that economic development is really about the attraction business, despite all the hubbub about Amazon you might have heard about. Really, economic development is working with your existing businesses. The middle market, small to medium-sized businesses is where most of our job growth will come from. We lack a place that is conducive to innovation. It also pointed out that talent is attracted to core urban active environments, which is why we see downtown Columbia plan being so successful. We have a transit connectivity gap. We should focus on international markets, and suburban poverty continues to increase, so we need to make sure that we're serving a broad range of job categories. So those were the 7 or 8 key findings of our plan that drove the 5 main strategies. And basically, it's the existing businesses, that is our retention and expansion work with our existing businesses, unleashing the potential of innovation, messaging and research, and attraction opportunities. If we do those first 3 things well, the attraction piece becomes much easier. So that's just a context for driving what we do and how we do it. And I urge you to read those 7 key findings in depth because it'll help craft your thinking as you work on your report. I'm currently in 2 locations. I'm in the Gateway building, which is where our main office is. But we also have a Center for Entrepreneurship on Bendix Road. Say goodbye to that building. It will be coming down soon to make way for the courthouse. Our MCE Center over at the Bendix building, we see between 8,000 and 10,000 visitors a year there through our small business counseling, our activities, our tech council support. It's a very active center in 25,000 feet of that Bendix building. Last year we served about 450 small businesses, almost 800 hours of business counseling that led to the creation of about 665 new jobs. Typically, 1 or 2, person type of entities in our small business counseling. Give you a sense of our small business funding. We are a fund manager for the state of Maryland for the Video Lottery Terminal Fund. And over the past 4 years, we have put about $8 million on the street. This is targeted for small minority, women-owned, and veteran businesses, and this is how it breaks down in terms of those sectors. Those projects have helped create over 400 new jobs, retained over 560 jobs, have leveraged another $31 million. So our initial investment leads to follow-on funding that is a very powerful multiplier. Just to give you a sense of our incubator and how it works and the effect that it has, this is data going back to about 2014. And we've counted the companies that are either have come through our center as resident companies or affiliates, and what they look like when they come to us, and what they look like either currently or as they graduated. So those companies, it's about 56 companies, came to us with about an aggregate total of about 232 employees and $16 million of revenue. They've either grown with us or have grown and graduated from us and currently employ about 514 employees and nearly $100 million of revenue. So we're tracking our impact of our incubator, doing what it's supposed to do, helping to create small companies and jobs. A little bit of market data. As you know, unemployment has gone down over the past several years. We ended 2018 with the lowest unemployment rate in about 10 or 11 years at 2.5%. I mean, that's getting pretty thin. That was the December numbers that just came out. Give you a glimpse of the size of businesses that are in the county. This surprises most folks when they see the statistic. Almost 82, 83% of our businesses have fewer than 20 employees. Another 15% between 20 and 99. Only 3% of our companies have 100 employees or more. And we really, this is our target market, the small businesses. We serve them all, but you see where the bulk of our work is. What types of jobs do we have in the county? Professional business services, we have one of the highest ratios of that job category amongst almost any county in the country. Professional business services, surprisingly, trade, transportation, and utilities is our second largest industry sector. This is, Route 1 corridor distribution, as well as retail. Please don't confuse information with IT. Information is like media, newspapers, and things like that. A small category for us. Just to give you a sense of the range of jobs. Our future job growth, I mean, obviously cybersecurity is a very strong sector for us. We're seeing, you know, that industry sector really cross-cuts all industry sectors. It cuts across finance and retail and healthcare. Health IT is another emerging sector for us. And we continue to focus on manufacturing and distribution. We're seeing brisk activity along the Route 1 corridor in those sectors as well. Talk a little bit about the tax base. This is just the commercial tax base and how it's grown over the past, call it 25 years. A little more recently, past 4 years, gone from about 7.7 billion to about 8.5 billion. This is of the total of the residential side of it. You'll see is, you know, closer to $40 billion. So when you look at our total property tax base, light blue is residential, and the dark blue is residential, and light blue is the commercial. We're at about 17% of our revenue is commercial. And we're always talking about how do we increase that commercial base versus our residential base. It's becoming increasingly difficult. You've heard about our land availability, etc. Just showed us that our commercial land is only 16% of it is actually developed. So, you know, the ratios sort of match. This is real property accessible base. Your next question is going to be, how do we compare to other counties? Here's how we compare to other counties. This is a percent, and just to, you know, this is a percent of the total, okay? So Howard County is towards the bottom of the other counties, sort of, in a way, as a percent. I mean, you know, Caroline County, Dorchester County, they don't have more commercial base, just as a percent of their base, right? So you can see Baltimore City obviously has a very large, because they're, you know, very dense commercially. This is as a percent of total, but if you look at in terms of number of commercial accounts, we're near the top of the chart. So we may have a lower percentage of the base, but we have a lot of commercial property to assess. So just a different way of looking at the numbers. I wanted to walk. Yes, sir.
Just one thing you should point out is that, you know, our biggest employer, APL, is off the rolls because it doesn't pay property tax. So that's, you know, obviously one thing that influences that. I don't think the pilot gets paid as a property tax.
It doesn't count on
so
that
that would distort that chart somewhat. So you're probably better than you put here.
Yeah, exactly. That's an excellent point. I mean, 7,000 employees on property that doesn't raise commercial.
Doesn't pay property tax.
Excellent point.
Derek, next question.
Hey.
Another question. How about our commercial tax rate compared to other counties?
There's a lot of ways to, depends who I'm talking to.
Sure.
Yeah, the real property tax, we're competitive, but then if you add in the fire and all that kind of stuff, we're towards the top of, we're an expensive county. I wouldn't say we're the most expensive, but we're close.
Yes.
Yeah. But sometimes I don't count fire tax because it's not a problem. Depends on my audience. If you guys can see this, I wanted to walk you through, because you're going to be talking about tax base and how to increase that proportion, that commercial tax base. So I've done a simple example just to help put it into context. So if you look at the numbers that we were just looking at, okay, we're at about $49 billion is our total assessable base. The commercial base of that is the $8.4 billion. That's where we get our 17%. Okay? Now, I know that the new MedStar building that was built downtown is 200,000 square feet. and it's assessed at $57 million. Okay? If we wanted to go to 18% from 17%, I need an additional $500 million, right? Well, $500 million is 8.5 of those. So what I'm trying to say is, boy, if we wanted to go from 17% to 18%, I need 8 more MedStar buildings, 8.5 more MedStar buildings. And this is all assuming that there's no increase in the residential assessment. This was just taking one variable and trying to put it into context for you. My annual office absorption rate is about 300,000 square feet a year. So to fill 8 MedStar buildings is going to take me maybe about 6 years or so. So it helps to, I think, picture how hard it is to increase your commercial taxable base. Now,
Larry,
yeah,
just as it's in your chart that you showed us a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
You actually have done more than that in the last few years. And it's reduced, well, you showed that we went from 7.7 billion to 8.5 billion in accessible base over the last, I think it was 4 years.
Yeah.
Well, our percentage went down because residential continues to grow.
Yeah.
Housing prices could drop.
Housing prices could drop, assessments could drop. The tenable building will certainly be a nice shot in the assessment. That's not.
Of that delta from 15 to 18, how much of that is value versus new and commercial?
I'd have to dig into it. Yeah. It's a good question.
Yeah, because generally the assessable base is partially attributed to new, but also a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and the way, and this is where vacancy kind of plays into it now because of a low vacancy. If a building's full, it assesses higher than a building without it. So that kind of plays into it.
If you fall.
There's that. Yes, sir.
Approximately, what's the vacancy rate?
For office, we are just under, we're about 9.5%, maybe 10. We've had a lot of new, we were at about 8.5, but MedStar Pearson, some others, new space coming onto the market. But it's still that's still a healthy, back in the old days when builders built speculatively, if it was below 10%, that was time to put up a building. There's a little bit of a throttle on that kind of enthusiasm, but not a lot of spec building happening right now. So is that example helpful? Does that make sense? Okay. So what are some ways that we can help? We've talked about land availability. We're having trouble finding room for schools. Where do we have commercial opportunities? We worked with Jeff's office several years ago to try and find how many commercial parcels do we have that were actually even over 5 acres in size that you can actually do something of scale. And there was only about 40 or so scattered throughout the county. And that was gross acreage. That doesn't account for wetlands and steep slopes. So, our commercial land is limited. So that's why we've looked at Gateway. I'm going to kind of run through why we're looking at Gateway as an opportunity. Opportunity for us, especially positioning it as an innovation district. And we've studied some work with the Brookings Institution as what makes an innovation district possible. And some of the existing elements of Gateway are there. We have, a concentration of some key industries and few property owners. There's only a few. There are parcels available for development, redevelopment. Obviously, the location, there's some good government institutional support there. So that positions Gateway as ripe for opportunity. This is just a smattering of some of the major institutions and employers that are there. Government contractors, medical, technology, health, education. Give you a sense of the opportunity that Gateway presents for us. It's about 900 acres, and there's 8 million square feet under roof. There's 2 parts to it. There's the office section back here, we call it Columbia Gateway, and the Commerce Center is the big all white warehouses that was the former GE facility. Give you a sense of, we've worked with a firm to do some land use analysis and to give us some broad visioning on Gateway. There's 155 acres of buildings under roof. There's 216 acres of surface parking. It's about 60% open space inside of Gateway. And to give you a sense of how it scales versus Columbia, that's downtown. There's Merriweather, Columbia Mall, the lakefront, fits inside of Gateway. And what we're talking about is we're not trying to compete with downtown. Gateway is just another opportunity for us. I mean, the downtown plan is in place and it's evolving nicely. This gives us another opportunity to complement downtown. And when you go back to that plan and you read about, where does the talent want to be and where do companies want to be is near their talent. The talent wants to be in active lifestyle, urban type environments. Here's Gateway versus Port Covington. You probably heard a lot about Port Covington in the city. This is probably one of our major threats to Howard County. They're under development right now. They're being very aggressive about recruiting companies. Most small technology companies that I talk to have been contacted by Port Covington, coaxing them to move to this to-be-built business park lifestyle center. It's going to look a lot like downtown Columbia in many ways. Living, entertainment, office, live, work, play. Just to kind of walk you through what Gateway could become, this is a small section of the park. Adding some green space, going vertical, a more dense type of plan, enhanced transportation system grid, a grid street system instead of just the big giant circle. It really is where Howard County can grow next. You all get a sense of what downtown Columbia has looked like. Gateway could look much similar, very, very similar to what downtown looks like. We are commissioning a study to get a sense of what that economic impact could be. It's 900 acres. It's a 40, 50, 60-year type of evolution. You start small and build it out in sections. One possible scenario is taking that, a couple hundred acres in the upper corner, right off of 175. There's another, just in this section alone, theoretically, you could put 2 million square feet of office space, some residential retail, and it could be almost another mini downtown type of plan. I mean, that's 4 million square feet of space. So that's a sense of what Gateway and the opportunities that it presents. We're working on an innovation center in Gateway right now, just because I have to relocate my Center for Entrepreneurship out of the Bendix building, and we hope for this to become the center of small business growth and activity, not only for technology businesses and to foster that, but all types of small business assistance. The college is already there, and with their customized training programs, it really is a center for small business development. So we've got some design plans, and we hope to be underway soon with putting our small business assistance into that innovation center. So just some images to help you conceptualize it. Other things that we're working on, and I'm running short on time. Route 1 obviously is a priority for us. We are growing in our international markets, not only attraction of foreign companies here, but to help our existing companies find markets elsewhere. Downtown Columbia continues to be a major piece of our work. Ellicott City, we just achieved our foreign trade zone status, and legislatively just working on our small business loan fund restoration, because that funding has been temporarily suspended. So this year we're working on trying to restore that small business assistance fund. So that's the best I know in 20 minutes.
Thank you very much.
Questions, comments?
Quick question.
Yes,
Do
sir.
we have any opportunity zones qualified in Howard County or not?
We do have one zone.
Is that on the east side of the county?
Yeah, there's not much opportunity there. It's behind the Costco at Route 108, 175. We don't know why that was selected. I don't believe we were asked.
Behind the Costco?
Yeah.
That's the opportunity.
That's the opportunity.
Let's see here.
Did they ask it?
Put them behind the Costco.
Yeah. Yeah. And it literally takes an act of Congress to change it, because it was an act of Congress that enabled it. So, yeah, I don't think we're going to see much opportunity in our zone. But we're that kind of county. We don't have those other type. We don't have enterprise zones or hub zones. We don't qualify. So it's no surprise. Good.
Thank you, Leonard.
Keith, well, I don't know if we're going to be talking about this, but if we look at demographics and we look at income levels, are there percentage barriers that we have to be, because we're going to be talking about how do we generate revenue, not bankrupt the county. Well, are there benchmarks that we need to stay away from, that people under 20, under 25, under 30, if we hit that as a total pool of what they have to pay out of their income, that when we get close to that, they're not coming here. They're not going to move here, they're not going to send kids to school here. And then if they're 65 or over, whatever, we know any of that, so we can kind of keep that in our mind as we're trying to figure this out. Is there anything out there?
I would say I don't know of any like hard data that points to it. You know, we do know that
It's a complex thing.
it is. I mean, it's an affordable housing issue. It's a lifestyle issue. I mean, we do know that, and you know, the data that was showing us in our plan, you'll see it there. You know, where talent goes when they're 20 to 30. You know, they're attracted to the active urban types of environments. But generally speaking, we know that when they start having hear the pitter-pat of little feet, Howard County is a very attractive place because of the school's body life. Safety becomes key issues. So I don't know how you quantify that, but we do see. But that does get into the housing affordability issue and what APFO does to that. Not that smart.
Thank you.
Good. Yes, ma'am.
Your video lottery terminal money, was it suspended or diverted? Is someone else getting it now, or is it just waiting?
For 3 years, it was diverted to Baltimore City Schools, and we're trying to get it restored. But often like highway user revenue, like once it goes, it's hard to get it back. Right. So we're working to get it restored. I mean, there was about $50 million across the state that went to small businesses, and it was probably the least advertised, most powerful tool that the state had devised for small business assistance. So we're trying to get it restored. If it doesn't, we still have $8 million. That's good. We'd like to see more.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We have about 45 minutes left, and we have 3 agencies to talk about health and human services here. So, Jackie.
So good morning, everybody. I know that it's early, and I'm going to say that we have talked a lot about data. I will have some more data for you also, but we're going to talk about people. The Department of Community Resources and Services is in the business of people. We're going to hear about health care, and the business of health care is really important. We've heard about it. We talked about housing. We talked about business development. All of those things that make up this county, if you think about the downstream flow, DCRS is a part of that bowl that catches all of that downstream flow, because we're really about people. So I want to have a couple of things before I run through these slides in the interest of time that I hope that you will be able to take away. First is, we're looking at how do we change the model of human service delivery. We are no longer the really small mom and pop shop that we used to be, yet we care deeply about deep touch outcomes in the community that make a difference. So we are still transformational in our mission to help support people in changing their individual lives, in changing the outcomes in the community, so that people have the opportunity to live their best life. At the same time, we now have to move to be transactional in some way. We have to think about the return on investment. How do we invest county dollars that are limited in resources, that are stretched, that have to be invested deeply to get outcomes? So that means you have to have data, you have to have tools, you have to have technology. So you have to think about the investments differently and then bridge this gap between transformational vision and mission and transactional kinds of outcomes. And so what you'll see throughout this presentation is sort of a theme that moves us in that direction. What does that look like? That looks like an investment in our people, because we are an increasingly growing county and community. You heard about the increased number of older adults that are now here in the community that will continue to grow. You also hear about the value and the wonderful diversity that we have here, racial, cultural, many different languages spoken here. We also have quite a bit of economic diversity also. The wage and wealth gap is increasing here in the county. And so what you have to understand about a department like ours is that we are not DSS. We are not the social service agency that is very much tied to the most vulnerable and many income constrained kind of programs. We serve everyone. We are able to serve people regardless of income. So that poses both wonderful opportunities for us, but also some significant challenges. Because when you can serve everyone, you have to be nimble enough, flexible enough, have the skill set in the teams to be able to meet the growth that's happening in the community. And then you also have to be flexible enough to move towards those trends in a real-time basis. So, let me tell you about who we are. Who are we right now in our operating budget? The numbers, $20 million in our overall budget. Sort of like a drop in the bucket. I always talk about the fact that I could just have one fire truck in my budget. Sometimes I'd be able to do a whole lot with that, right? But $20 million, 155 employees. And this is also part of what many people are interested in, our community service partnerships grants, and the continuum of care grants. This is the area of which we serve our deepest end folks. So under the community partnerships grants, we are probably the largest funder of our nonprofit community, and we'll talk a little bit about that in the future slides. We also receive both federal and state grants that we then use some to provide services, but then we push a lot of those out into the community, because we as one government agency of 155 employees can't do it all. So what we do is try to become the place at which we serve the continuum of the lifespan, but we can't do it without the partnership of the folks in the community. So we have these offices under our umbrella. So as you see, we serve the very youngest to the very oldest and everyone in between. Again, very few of the programs within these offices require income qualification. So you can be in poverty and come in and provide we provide services to you. You can be a millionaire and need our services, and we provide services to you also. So what do we do in addition to the direct kind of linkages to people in the community related to human services? we also have a broader county function in a couple of areas. I'll point out that we are the enforcement agency for the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. We only have enforcement authority with regards to other government and county agencies though. Our role with the private sector is sort of a mediator, negotiator. Someone files a complaint because the restaurant isn't accessible. We go out, we do the investigation, but we don't have enforcement authority. What we do is advise, we mediate, we help the business try to, with recommendations, but really, we can't make them do it. That person would have to then go to the state to file a report and then a claim there. What people don't really know, but perhaps in the last few years have learned a lot more about this function for us, is that we are in charge of mass care and sheltering in times of an emergency and donations management. So again, we need to be nimble. 2 floods. We are stood up and we're working in an emergency context. Snowstorm. We are stood up and we are working in an emergency context. A federal shutdown. Stood up and we are working in that context. So while that wasn't, the shutdown in a traditional emergency preparedness context, again, being nimble and the ability to be able to function and do our day-to-day functions while we're responding to an emergency with those same 155 employees is something that is important for you to keep in mind about how we reach our goals. So, what do we know about the people in the community? What do we know about who we are here in Howard County? You've heard some of this, but I just want to highlight a few of these. Now, the next few slides, the data has come from ACS. They do, many of you may be familiar with the self-sufficiency report. And then also the United Way's ALICE report. We will work closely with both agencies, but I want to highlight some things for you that I think are really important. We know what our median income is, and these numbers move around just a little bit, I know. But from their latest report, which goes back a couple years, but I want you to see that 22% of our households earn less than $60,000. That's 24,000 households. And about 6,300 of those households have less than $20,000. So again, there's the wage gap. A single adult needs to earn $34,000, $35,000 to be able to be what is termed in the report self-sufficient, and an adult with 2 school-aged children needs to make at least about $68,000. But what does that really mean? Those who are making it know that, or trying to make it, know that it is hard to live off of $16 an hour here in this county. Almost impossible given the rents and everything else. What does the everything else look like? What do we know? Look at that child care number. Center-based child care for preschoolers has increased 20%. You are looking at since 2012. So you are looking at $19,000 a year for child care. How do you do that on those wages and still pay your rent or your mortgage and your transportation? We are a highly insured county. We are very healthy when we look at our neighbors around us, but not everybody is able to equally benefit from that. So, for example, 22% of the people talk about that they haven't been to a dentist in 2 years. So we look at where are the gaps, where are the healthcare gaps, who's receiving what. The number of residents enrolled in Medicaid continues to increase for many reasons. But again, we're looking at this wage gap and the economic impact of, the gap between those who are really making it and those who are barely able to make it day to day. And so the ALICE report talks about those people who are limited and constrained in their incomes because perhaps working anyplace else or living anyplace else with $60,000 a year you would be okay. You could raise a family, but it's very difficult here in Howard County. A few other points about who we are. We are the continuum of care for our county. We receive the HUD dollars from HUD to go into our homeless services and homeless prevention initiatives. And so we push those grants out into the community, and they also go towards supporting our work. What I'd like you to see, though, pay attention to, is the number of evictions. 488 evictions reported in 2017. Those people just don't go away. They've gotten eviction assistance from programs that either we have or our community partners have. They have been working with people who are case managers trying to be rehoused, but people are facing evictions all the time in this county, and the number is rising. Housing. 33% of the renters had incomes less than $50,000. It is tough to live and rent here in Howard County. Food insecurity is critical. It is a place at which we need to pay attention. There are working families every day that are hungry. So when you look at a department like ours, and when we say we're not the poverty agency, this is why. There are people working every day, really hard, going to school, 2 and 3 jobs, one really what they feel like good job, right? But the thing about our department is they're one divorce away, they're one illness away, they're one family tragedy away, they're one death away. Whatever happens, life happens. And we're the place at which we get those people coming in the door. So what does that look like? Who are our populations? We talk about having no wrong door for this reason, because you may find yourself caring for an older adult, you may have a child living with a disability and you need care, you may be a victim in crisis, a victim of human trafficking, you can just have lost your job and now be in a different income strata. These are families, veterans, older adults. We serve the lifespan. So how does it happen for us in that no wrong door? This is what we talk about being the web of support. People often come in thinking that they have one concern. They're trying to figure out they've lost their job, they need additional employment and training, but they need transportation to get there. Do we have the ability to help them? We work with them, but after talking with them, we find out that they're housing insecure. So then we're working with them to secure their housing. Perhaps they realize that there is a healthcare need that they have. And by the time they walk out the door, it kind of looks like this, right? And as this happens, DCRS in itself shrinks to the background because our role has been to connect the person to the services that they need, provide the services that we have in-house, but many times do that along with connecting them with our partners at DSS, connecting them with our partners at the health department, connecting them down the hall to our partners at housing to ensure that their holistic needs are met so that they can live their best lives. So oftentimes you hear about us, but you don't hear about us because what we're doing is that facilitating, that connecting, we're providing that safety net. So how else does that web of support play out for us? This way. I started out talking about our role in the community partnerships grants. We are providing funds to the nonprofit community at a significant rate to help meet the needs of this community. So the web of support doesn't stop at 9830, and with the other government partners, we have a significant role in making sure that the needs are met day to day in the community. So we have this past year put out $8 million into the community. This is county dollars. $8 million into the community. 81% of those dollars are operating grants to nonprofits. We have what we call one-time grants for initiatives that nonprofits come and say they need. They need a new HVAC system. They need some more computers. They need technology. They need something in infrastructure that they can point to that has direct outcomes for their work or is meaningful for them to be able to do their work. One-time costs. The plan to end homelessness is focused on just that, meeting the needs so that we can close the gap and house people and make sure that homelessness is rare, brief, and non-reoccurring. Then there's this group of supplemental funds. These supplemental funds are often things that people ask about. Well, what do you do? So organizational support. You will see in the slide shortly right after this how much certain organizations are leveraged on county dollars. And so oftentimes organizations need support to bring in people to help them look at their organizations, to help build their capacity, to help them with fundraising plans, sustainability plans. We have funds set aside to invest in those nonprofits. Those nonprofits, if they are successful, we are successful because we're all focused on serving the community and increasing the outcomes into the community. And then there's client assistance. So all of those cold days that we had last week and the week before, we'll probably have, tomorrow, even though it's 60 today, it'll be, we fund Code Blue. So every time the county puts out Code Blue, we make sure through our partners at Grassroots and others in the cold weather shelter that we fund what it takes to put people in hotel or in Grassroots and anywhere they need to be safe and off the street. Now we know we live here in Maryland, so one year you may not have any snow and the next year you can have snow again, right? So these pots of dollars have to have some flexibility. So sometimes I'm doing multiple things to meet the need. But this is an $8 million investment in addition to that web of support that you saw earlier of my $20 million budget. This is what I think is important for you to pay attention to. Look at the increase over time. So FY19, this is in millions, so we talked about that $6.5 million just in that initial fund, right? Not including those other supplemental pieces. This is a projected FY20, we just closed the application process. If we were to fund at the level that has been requested this year, this would be the rise. $8.2 million has been requested in the CSP grant process this year. Now, why is that important to recognize? It's important because anytime there is a shift from the federal government or the state government or someone else's private sector funding, they turn to the county for support, right? So we saw significant shifts in places because of federal government dollars and federal government programs being changed. That then shifts to the state. State makes their own decisions about what they will or won't fund. We also have increased numbers around, for example, MDOA, our Department of Aging, and others. Everybody's looking at the increased numbers. So as things trickle from above, they trickle down into this county, and our nonprofits then are looking for continued support. But from a business model, where I started this conversation, this is both an opportunity and a challenge for us, because we are, in our sense, creating a situation where we're going to move into being too big to fail. There are organizations that are deeply, deeply, critically important to the work, to the core functions of this community. But we cannot sustain this rate of growth in the financial piece of what we're looking at and sustain a county agency, right? Because I have to have the infrastructure, I need the investment to help them be successful, and they need core investments. So somehow, we have to work together to make the choices about how we turn the ship slowly but surely, right? And so I know there's a question, Nikki, and I'll be right there. So this is demonstrative of sort of what we have to be thoughtful about in our investments. And so as you're thinking about those investments, so in FY18, 7 of the 29 agencies that were funded in CSP received a third of those dollars. 7, right? In the projection of FY20, based on what's requested, 10 of the 40 applicants would receive 1/3 of their revenue out of CSP. So the actuals look here. Look at the percentage. Now just think about best practices. What we have to do is help cultivate an environment where we can help our nonprofits become sustainable, but not so heavily leveraged on county dollars, so that when we need to make county investments to adequately respond to shutdowns and snowstorms and other emergencies, we have to figure this out. So these are the kinds of things, because every home that's built, every school that's built, every business that comes into this county has an impact on the work at DCRS, because people come to us. The more they know about the services that are available to them here in this county, it is an opportunity for them to come. They need caregiving for their older adult. They want to make sure there's a 50-plus center available. They want to make sure that there are home visitors available for their child who has a disability. Those kinds of things, those are important. So we are thinking critically from both the transformational perspective and the transactional perspective, so that we can be good stewards of the dollar. So with that, I'll pause. I'll ask Nikki, you had your hand up first, and then I can go to Barbara.
Jackie,
Yes.
I think one of the things that the committee needs to be aware of is that how our nonprofit infrastructure developed in this county. We didn't have a community service grant program, and nonprofits stepped up. If we look at surrounding counties, the county is paying for those services for the homeless, for domestic violence. They're running those programs out of the county, so that the true cost, at one point, Jim Roby said that the county was getting such a great deal that they were paying 50 cents for $1 worth of services from the nonprofits. That's an important distinction. I mean, what is the total that the nonprofits that you all are servicing, what are their total budgets? That's a more relevant figure to me, because then I can decide whether we're funding at an adequate level. And also, I just think we have to keep in mind that we are getting a bargain with our nonprofits.
So absolutely. So when the program was developed, it was developed for that reason. And I think in good practice, as the county infrastructure grew, we didn't adequately also think about, and no fault, this is what we do. We do it really well. We work together really well. What I am looking at is sustainability. So we are not that small place at which we did not have a housing department, a housing department, a department, that was as big as ours with 8 offices. We didn't have the county infrastructure when this started. And so you're absolutely right. So in one instance, that's why I say it is an opportunity and a challenge. That information is absolutely public, and every nonprofit can share that with you, but it's also public in our budget book. We do an audit, we have all of that information. And so when I say that they are leveraged, it is looking at their total budget, okay? It's looking at their total budget. And so when you're looking at these investments, you also want to make sure that when you invest operating dollars, you're also able to get some outcomes for those investments that you can then track in a meaningful way. And so we're working to make sure that that's able to happen. But you're absolutely right. When those were formed, they were formed just for that reason. And now the county has evolved, they have evolved, and our community has evolved, both in their needs and their numbers. And so we're looking at all of that very carefully. Thank you.
It would be interesting to have comparable data that had both investment, again, other counties provide those services to county government as opposed to nonprofits. It would be interesting to see how they stack in terms of human services, whether it's nonprofit or whether it's county, relative to our neighboring counties. And some of the graphs that Larry provided were comparable. It would be interesting to see some of that. It's hard to know if that $1 billion is, it's based on need clearly, but how do we compare to our neighboring?
Absolutely.
Do we have that information?
We don't have it laid out like that, no. But we can get it. Our nonprofits can also provide you with information with regards to their total, for their total budgets and expenditures. But again, when you're looking at a pocket of operating dollars, they go to operate, you know, as a funder. So the ability to target what the outcomes are based on the needs in the community and support the organization is a very delicate balance. And so there are then those other areas that we support our nonprofits in, and this is not a CSP conversation. That's why I didn't provide all of that data. But what people need to understand is when they're looking at our department, the scope and the depth of the work is not just what happens in our building, it is how we are intricately tied to and working with on a daily basis and moving those outcomes and meeting those needs behind that web in a way that people don't often see. So that's why that conversation is here. Yes, and I know our next group has to come, and that includes our other substantial partners. Yeah.
Because I want to, I guess, clarify what kind of, are you saying that, because we're talking about revenue needs and expense needs, are you saying that the department needs more funding, or are you saying that you can do more if you weren't allocating the resources
absolutely
to the nonprofit?
not. So this is not about cutting the nonprofit.
So you're saying
but
you
what
need
I'm
more
saying
funding.
is we need to invest in both, right?
Okay.
The rate of growth that we're investing in our community has not equaled the rate of investment in technology, in tools, in training, in staff that we're seeing in the growth of that we see in meeting our community.
So there's an additional
there's an additional need, and there's a need to look at the outcomes that we're getting and we're driving towards based on the shifting needs of the community. And those were, you can see those on the slides that you will have them, but those, as you talk about what we're seeing in the community, these are the trends, and this is the way at which we need to begin to think about how we're delivering services, because these are the populations where we're seeing the need grow the most.
Thank you very much. These are all great questions. We only have several minutes left. We still have 2 agencies, so thank you so much, Jackie. And I have one on the roster. Kelly on the table. This is a great discussion. It's just probably not allow everybody to fully.
And I'm happy to.
And we'll be happy to put it right. Thank you so much. Really quickly on
Hello, those that are still here. So for those that don't know me, I'm Maura Rossman. I'm the health officer for the health department. And to be respectful of everyone's time, I think I had 8 minutes or something like that for the county council, so I will try to reduce this to 8 minutes. Skip over some things. There's comments right here. Just a reminder of what the health department does. We are a state agency, but really committed to improving the quality of life here in Howard County. and obviously work very intimately with county government and our partners within Howard County. And a phrase just to keep in mind is, it's been said when public health is on the job, it's basically invisible. I like to think more we're like the underground at Disney World. Above ground, you have Epcot and you have Magic Kingdom, and there is an army of people underneath making sure that above ground everyone is safe, healthy, eating great food, and having fun. And that's essentially what public health does. We talked, and I'm not going to go into that, lots of considerations about population and changes in population. Essentially, I think it was mentioned, we're fairly healthy community. You look at our data, cancer, heart disease are our leading causes of death. Really not unusual. We talked a little bit about equity and health equity. I think it was mentioned we do have health disparities in Howard County, and you can even see based on life expectancy, and you can even geocode it as well. We have the presentation, so if you want to dig into the data, we have lots of data. The health department, going back even before me, has something called Health Stat, where monthly we are examining more than 1,000 data elements and trying to synthesize what the data means, really to inform decisions and what we do both present and going forward. Some of the concerning trends and you can see what we even try to do about it. I don't know if you've heard in the press. Thank you, Howard County Public Schools, for partnering with us to address increasing STI rates, or sexually transmitted infection rates, in our 15 to 19-year-old. So we joined Baltimore City and Montgomery County in providing testing for our youth, confidential testing for our youth, and condoms. So just an example of how we use data to drive our action and work with our people in our community, because I think, maybe Jackie said, we can't do this alone. It's the village. So let's spend the next 5 minutes or so talking about where I think there are opportunities to improve the health in Howard County. Talk about substance use, mental health, health equity, and chronic disease prevention and management. So I was asked to talk, and way too much data, but you have it on opioids. I think the last time we were here, I showed the chart. We just have another year. We've all heard, I think, more than enough about the increasing opioid deaths. Most of this is related to the drug fentanyl, which is being mixed with not just our heroin, but also cocaine. And there has been a very steep climb in our deaths. Good news, we've seen a reduction in our fatalities from 2017 to 2018 by about 30%. So that is the good news. Also, I think good news in terms of our overall overdoses. Again, you can see this is both fatal and non-fatal overdoses, a very steep climb. And then from 2017 to 2018, a leveling off. Still having way too many. One overdose is too many, but at least we're not seeing that steep climb. This data is Howard County Police data. So, what are some of the things that we can attribute this to? Addiction is a very complex disorder. It's a disorder of relapse. It's a disorder that affects every sector in this county, every demographic, every age group. So since last year, we are using a framework called Lazarus. It's a hub and spoke model where we have starting from prevention, treatment, education, enforcement, and working through these in a strategic, orderly manner. We now have 6 peer recovery support specialists who are employed by Howard County Health Department, who work in the hospital, who work in the detention center, who work with On Our Own, one of the nonprofits that I believe is supported by CSP. and other areas to meet users where they are. Our peers are professionals with lived experience with substance abuse. They've been there, they've done that, and they are trying to work with that individual to meet them where they are, keep them safe, keep them healthy, and ultimately a goal to get into treatment with long-term sobriety. We have lots of overdose trainings. If you have not yet participated in one of our trainings, it started out as an hour training. We can now do it in 5 minutes, where you will be trained to recognize someone who may be overdosing, being able to administer a life-saving drug called naloxone, and go home with your drug. I actually carry it around in my purse. And there have been overdoses, I can tell you, in our big box stores, supermarkets, really anywhere, so you never know when you can save a life. Screening, brief intervention, and referral to treatment is an evidence-based practice that you can identify folks who are high risk for addiction, hopefully refer them and get them into the appropriate kind of treatment, and we'll have expert going on in the detention center at grassroots, and we are working with the hospital to train ED staff. Narcan, I talked about, it's in every government building, and we now work with fire and rescue with something called leave behind kits. So when somebody overdoses and they refuse transport to the hospital, we leave behind a kit for their family and friends and for them to use. The relocation of Howard House, some of you are aware that we have a limited stock of inpatient treatment facilities for addiction. We have one, it's called Howard House, currently located on College Avenue. Our lease has been up 2 or 3 years. The good news is in March we will have our grand opening, and it's now relocated to county property off 108 with an increase of 1 bed. Just see some of the data. We are blitzing our community with Narcan. You can see the reduction in fatal overdoses and sort of a static minimal increase in total overdoses. These are just illustrative mapping that where I talked about it happens anywhere. So these are unintentional overdose deaths by counts, and you can see what lights up. The darker purple is more prevalent. However, if you light it up or light it up by rates, you can see the Western County lights up. So just it's a problem everywhere, all of us. We have a scorecard now and trying to convey sort of this very complex issue and show how that we're trying to tackle this and make sure that we're having an impact and holding ourselves and our community accountable for results. This is all in the presentation. I want to talk about youth suicide, spend the last minute talking about youth suicide. Fact. Suicide is the leading cause of death among our 15 to 19-year-olds, and that's data going back between 2014 and 2016. I preface that by saying in Maryland it's the second leading cause of death. So I'm not, in some ways I am trying to make a statement, but it's a problem from my perspective. Why in Howard County it's number 1. And if you look at other Maryland data, our rates, our numbers are low, but they are increasing more compared to Maryland. Suicide among our young people is not just a Howard County problem. We're seeing increases across other parts of the state and nationally, unfortunately. Data you can see from our YRBS, sort of trying to figure out why youth may be dying by suicide, and again you can see 1 in 6 high school students have seriously considered attempting suicide, and even 20% of our middle school students have seriously committed suicide. So the trends also are nationally that younger kids are attempting suicide and dying by suicide. So we put together over the summer our youth suicide prevention plan. Again, we have 5 pillars ranging from just increasing awareness from this problem and reducing the stigma to preventing early identification and intervention, getting folks in treatment, and something called postvention, what you do after suicide to prevent reoccurrence among family members or for those that were unsuccessful in their attempt to preventing them from trying again. And you will see probably within the next 4 weeks a campaign that's called It's Okay to Ask. It's really just to, not minimizing it, increase awareness across our community regarding this issue and to begin to educate people about what to do. There was a recent study, I think that just came out in pediatrics 2 weeks ago, where they compared parents' opinions about whether or not they think their children are thinking about suicide, and then the kids' opinion, and there's complete discordance. Parents have no idea what their kids are thinking, and I guess that's most of us, and vice versa. So as a parent, we really need to start talking to our kids about a lot of things, including how are you feeling, have you ever thought about these things, and taking them seriously. So more to come on that. It's my time up. I want to, housing is really important since we get to health equity. People have to have a place to live, but I don't want to take up Kelly's time. So you tell me what you want to do. You have all the slides.
Just a couple minutes.
Okay, health equity. Where this comes in is we know that if you look at health outcomes, more than 40% of our health outcomes have nothing to do with whether or not you show up at your doctor's office. It has to do with what's called the social determinants of health. Do you have a house over your head? Do you have food? Do you have social supports? Have you graduated from college? So as we crank, we have one of the lowest uninsured rates in Maryland, really good. As we try to crank the healthcare gears, to make the improvement, I think, in our health outcomes, we really need to concentrate and be aware of our social determinants of health, because I think that's where we will probably get, at this point, the biggest bang for the buck. We have deployed a tool called Care App, which is an electronic referral system and tracking mechanism where there are about 20 agencies in Howard County using Care App where we can link to each other and make electronic referrals based on primarily the social determinants of health. So I think this is an area that's really important to concentrate, particularly in light of Jackie's report, and I think probably what you'll hear from Kelly. Chronic disease prevalence, I'll leave you, I think, with this. We talked about the leading causes of death: cancer, heart disease, stroke. We're aging. If we really, again, want to improve our health outcomes, we need to really work on prevention and keeping ourselves healthier as we live longer, and that has everything to do with being able to get the appropriate exercise, eat healthy foods, and be empowered to take care of ourselves. Just again, examples of maps and how we look at things. I don't really understand, but you can see sort of the eastern part of the county lights up for diabetes, western part hypertension. And what we would hope to do, where I think it would be a small investment with big outcomes. We've been working with our first responders, fire and rescue, and the hospital, and we've learned that there's a small group of folks that call 911 often, and then a smaller group that actually get transported to the hospital often. And so, and a large proportion of the folks that aren't transported, not really sure why they're calling 911 all the time. Well, my bet is, yes, they're sick, things are going on, and my bet is these social determinant things that I'm talking about are a lot going on. So other folks across the country, and actually even in Maryland, have something called mobile integrated health, where you work with first responders, your paramedics, health department, hospital, and try to engage those high utilizers of our 911 system and try to figure out what they need, more so than sending the paramedics out, which is probably not what they really need. So I will end with that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I apologize for taking long, but you know.
I'm going to give you a,
very
I'll be in
engaged.
5 minutes. 5 minutes, I'm going to give you
Very,
4
very
or
good
5.
discussion.
You have the slides, so I'm not going to take a lot of time going over those, but I want to point out a couple of things. Good morning, I'm Kelly Simino from the Department of Housing and Community Development. The department receives transfer tax, 12.5% of the county's transfer tax to fund the department's activities and programs. We also receive something called MIHU fee in lieu revenue, which many of you may have heard of. That's a very popular buzzword out in the community, is the fee in lieu revenue. We also receive some grant funding from HUD. It's our Community Development Block Grant funding and our home funding, and some interest income on some loans. So the Housing Department's entire budget for this year is $7 million. I just want to compare that to Jackie's budget of $20 million. I also want to state that the Housing Department does not receive any general funds. We only receive transfer tax and our federal grant funds. So just as you are looking at dollars and cents, there, in terms of general funds. The use of those funds, thank you, Raul, is creating affordable units, homeownership units, rental units, preserving affordable homeownership units and rental units, creating workforce housing units. We also do financial education. So what I want to show with this is what the Housing Department, we have many programs and activities, but this is what we're talking about, is how do we create affordable units, either for rental or home ownership. So what that means for us is, in the county, my area median income figure differs a little from Jackie's. We use $111,473 for our area median income. When we create an affordable home ownership unit, that will serve a family that earns up to 80% of that area median income. So a family of 4 earning up to $89,178 would qualify for an affordable home ownership unit. A family to qualify for an affordable rental unit would be a family of 4, $66,887. So I'm just trying to, if the median income's 111, we're serving families at 60% and $60,000 and $80,000, just to give you an idea.